I look down on all the people looking up at the big sky. Everybody's pushing one another around.
Welcome to the 2-Month Review. This is Chad. I'm here with Brian.
Hey guys.
And this is our weekly podcast in which we read a single novel over a 2-month period, talk about it, analyze it, engage with it, and enjoy it bit by bit. Right now, we're reading The Invented Part by Rodrigo Frazan, and today we're going to be discussing the second part of the second section of the book, the section called The Place Where the Sea Ends So the Forest Can Begin, but we'll be talking specifically about pages 99 through 207, which hopefully you've already read and laughed at and all that kind of stuff. And this week, our special guest is Tom Flynn, who is you're the manager of Volumes Bookstore in Chicago, correct?
Yeah, manager and lead buyer.
Manager and lead buyer, which means that you bought no fewer than 30 or 40 copies of The Invented Part for the store.
I mean, at least that many, right? Yes, quite a few. We've actually been selling it pretty well since it arrived in the store. So,
oh, great.
Yeah.
What are the categories? What are the categories of buyers? I like that there's lead buyers. I like military, where you can be a captain and a colonel and a.
It totally depends based on a store. Like some stores have specific people or teams handling their buying, and so one person will be a backlist buyer, one person will be the children's book buyer or children's backlist or front list or adult or this or that. Lead buyer in this case, I think we just kind of came up with to indicate that I do 95% of all the buying in the store, and so it's sort of a descriptor beyond just managing the store.
Well, it sounds a lot better than like alpha. I'm the alpha dog buyer.
I don't know.
I'm the man.
That's kind of tempting. I might suggest that for I've got a business card yet, so maybe we'll put that on the business card, alpha dog buyer, and just see how people react to that at the next conference.
Just a picture of a wolf head. It says alpha buyer.
Absolutely. Show up to Winter Institute and hand those cards out, and everyone else just stare at me like, what is going on here?
That would be spectacular.
That would be great.
So I have a question for you. So I was looking at, we have to insert our new books in the Ingram system in this coming week, and they have a section for ages, for what age your book is appropriate for. And it's mostly for children's books, right? So board books are 0 to 3, whatever. Young adult is 18 to 20, or 12 to 18. And then there's a category called new adult, ages 18 to 25. What is this? You work at a bookstore. You must know. Is this a thing?
New adult is just one of those things they're trying. I think my understanding of it is that it's this attempt to sort of put young adult novels that might be more. Some of the young adult novels that are being purchased by adults, and that's the main thing they read. And there are a lot of adults who only read young adult. But instead of saying it's young adult, it's new adult. And so I think you're going to see a lot of young adult titles that get sort of straddle that line. As much as they can, we place in both categories, or possibly put into the new adult category, but with the idea being that it goes directly into the children's book section.
Wow.
But tons of stores, their young adult sections are moving out of the kids section itself, or they're right on that in-between point within the store, just so that folks can kind of scan the new titles and not, feel weird about wandering past the kids' books in a story time to go grab, the new Veronica Roth or what have you.
Well, because I wanted to read some YA, but I was hoping there might be some hand jobs in it. So that might be a new adult title, because I'm kind of new to this adult thing, and this what is a new adult title? Jeez, that's weird. It's like a PG-13 movie saying "fuck" one time in it, right?
Exactly.
Oh, edgy.
So as a not a very good segue, I'm going to tell you that you guys do have competition. We saw on Amazon this weekend that The Invented Part was the #1 new release in Spanish and Portuguese literature.
Great.
Hey, congratulations. That's awesome.
But if you live in Chicago, you should go buy the book at Volumes.
That'd be great, or any of the wonderful indies in Chicago. But
make it #1 in Chicago too.
That would be good. Yeah, and I mean, our stores 57th Street and Unabridged and Bookseller. They're all pretty deeply into translated lit. So I think that's definitely a distinct possibility. But
you guys have Chicago is. I've said this before. I think drunkenly last time we were together. But Chicago has the probably the best book selling scene in the country, I think. For like people who like number of bookstores that exist, the quality of those bookstores, the people who work there, and the people who work there for a long period of time, so they have a career as a bookseller or in bookstore owning or managing or whatever aspect of that. But that's pretty rare. I mean, that doesn't even really happen in New York, and like a lot of other big cities are down to like one or two independent stores of note, and you guys are just keep opening new ones. It seems like in Chicago.
Yeah, it's been going pretty well in that regard. I mean, I guess volumes in the last just over a year ago, and then before that was I think City Lit, and yeah, I mean they're opening pretty steadily, and yeah, I mean it's definitely a pretty strong scene. There are ways we want to make it stronger and have even more interaction among the booksellers and the buyers and the owners and all that. So I mean when you're coming through town in June, the Publishers Night we're going to do is designed to do exactly that, make sure that we all know each other and can share info and all that. Not function as a cartel, but still share info and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's a good scene. It's fun. It's been very fun to be part of this for over a decade now.
Ah, that's fantastic. So also, Brian, how are you doing? Are you recovering from your weekend well?
Yeah. It was, I don't know, I did too much memorializing apparently. I don't know. I forget what the rhyme is for like beer and liquor and whatever, but
you broke it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was kind of like, imagine somebody from like Denmark and it's the first day of summer and they just run into their closet and throw on random summer clothes, and that's kind of how I drank. It was like a crop top with capri pants and sandals and just mixing weird things together. It started off with like a dark beer that was aged in bourbon barrels.
Right on.
Did some of those.
Well, that right there is going to set you off.
Yeah. And then a Manhattan.
Nice.
And then a couple bottles of red wine,
right
and then cognac, and then port. So
there was actually a bit of a progression to it, though. It wasn't like it wasn't like you opened with port and then like halfway through decided just to do a little cognac and then jump back to like a really dark bourbon barrel aged beer at the end. I mean,
I better have some chartreuse before I pass out.
it could have gone a lot worse if you like really messed up that order too much more than that.
Yeah, so I'll try to help out as much as I can on this one, but I'm just kind of trying to stay upright at this point. But I'll make it through.
At least you didn't have any Malort, the famous Chicago.
God, stop it with the Malort. No one should drink Malort. This was never a thing until like 5 years ago. God, damn it. I hate Malort.
Yeah, so right on. So Malort is not your favorite drink. If anyone hasn't had that, it's the worst thing ever. Don't ever do it. It should never be associated with anything or anyone or be anywhere near your person.
Man.
At all. It is gross. So anyways.
Well, speaking of throbbing headaches, can you explain what the hell is going on between the typewriter font and the black font in this giant freaking paragraph that we just read?
So I'm not entirely...
Take it away, Chad.
I think that might be the ending good question, because you asked me that by text message, and I gave you a response that I don't know is right. But anyways, this chapter, so this is the second part of the second section of the book. If you remember, he wrote all 7 of these simultaneously. They're all kind of about the writer and coming at the writer in his life and post-life in a variety of different formats. And this section is in the second part. This what is it called actually? The place where gosh, no, I can't find the beginning. The place where the sea ends, so the forest can begin. Last week we talked about the first of the 3 sections of this, and that was about the young man and the young woman who are coming to make a movie of the writer's life, and they're staying outside of his mad sister's house. The second part, which is the one that we're talking about today, is the song of Penelope, the mad sister, and like her life. So basically, at her life level, to take it on the most simplistic level to begin with, or simplistic way to describe it, she is like was the baby, the unborn baby in the first chapter when the young boy, when the eventual writer is at the beach and his mom and dad are fighting and they are going to get divorced or whatever, and she's the baby that's there, or that's unborn, the fetus, I guess. Anyway, so she's born, she has a life, she meets this guy named Maximiliano, is that what it is? Karma, when she's living it up in Europe, and he's away from his family in Europe because his family is this giant clan of very wealthy, crazy people living, I believe, in like a Mexico City sort of place. And they fall in love. They have this whirlwind romance. They do a lot of drugs. And then they get married. And then I believe on their wedding night, he does too many drugs and goes into a coma, at which point she is transported with his body back to the Karma's world where this whole family, this gigantic family of all these people live. And we get like a long descriptive parts about why this family is basically insane, that they're very, very wealthy and like the worst kind of wealthy. They live like a telenovela life. They don't read anything. They're all like basically talking behind each other's back. They're like Kardashians, but of a different version. And eventually, and they're overseen by like Mama Grandma, who's like the matriarch of the whole clan. And Penelope never quite fits in, but she's sort of stuck there. Eventually, she is going to have a second wedding to Maxie because they need it to be done in a church and with their priests. So they set up this whole Baroque thing with 7 priests, each reading parts of the ceremony. And in the middle of that, Penelope's one friend there gets assassinated. Penelope loses her shit. She doesn't finish the ceremony, runs off, finds a bunch of diamonds, finds this green cow, which had been implanted or foreshadowed earlier in the thing, drinks from the green cow, milk to stay alive, which probably drives her insane, kills her husband, and is impregnated by him possibly, and that is the end of it. Right?
Oh, I didn't get any of that, but all right, that works.
Yeah, that's about right.
That's about as cogent as you can make it, I think. Yes.
So that is as a we could get into more parts of our details of that thing, because this is the longest section of the book that we read for this podcast. It's also the one with the most dense plotting, I believe. I might be wrong about that as we go back through it, but in my mind, this is the one that had the most kind of little setup plot points. But the main thing that you're asking about is that it's told in 2 voices, kind of. There's regular font, the same way that we've had our fonts up until this point. And interjected in there are these sort of footnotes of a kind that are in a different font that's like a typewriter font and is a different, it's lighter, so it's not as dark as the typeface for the regular part. And it's almost like it's reflecting upon what's being written or
Right.
adding to it.
I mean, it almost functions like a Greek chorus to a certain degree.
Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, especially if you're going to pull in the whole Penelope Ulysses component, which she brings up very early on.
Yep.
Is that, I mean, and you're getting, I mean, I took it as the voice of the writer from whatever his state is now, but he's offering perspective on the plot as it's developing, while also, like you said, seeding for future development.
That's perfect. That's the way to. So, like, here's like the closest that it comes to actually laying that out too is on page like 101, where it says, I guess 100, where it says nothing more and nothing less than that instant, suspended between nothing and everything, when a writer spends an eternity of seconds thinking of what he'll subsequently put down in writing, a map of unfathomable distance separating the measures of the cerebral score from the arrival of the fingers to the goal of the keyboard, coming out of the same body but from a different source in a different font. And to state the obvious, that font is American typewriter, right? Because that was the script on his first typewriter, and because Penelope's brother is a writer, always with a particular and often criticized interest in American literature, and over and out for a while. So it is like that. I envisioned it the first time I read this, and I think this time too, that is the writer from beyond wherever he is, sort of interjecting or kind of talking about like that creative process that she provided. Penelope, through her interactions with the Karmas, provided like a great wealth of like stories and things that you could somehow mold into a grand epic narrative. and she's sort of trying to do that, and he's done it. Like, if you remember in the part before this, she references that her brother mined her experiences with them for one of his novels, and that sort of pissed her off a little bit. And so it's almost like he's taking that, and she's giving him information, and he's trying to mold it. And now in this new state of his, he's going back and adding to that, and being like, it could have been this way, or it could have been molded this way, or here's more details to it. Here's more and more of like, how does that creative process, how do you change something from the raw details into something more of a creative artifice?
Yeah, and you get the sense too, just below that a little bit, that it's kind of, that chorus is kind of in a voice of authority and objectiveness in a way. Because with the Abracadabra, the Steve Miller song, like it says, who sang that? It's like Abracadabra, written by Steve Miller and performed by Steve Miller Band from 82 Elm. Like,
Exactly.
Just bang, gives you the footnote of, here, I'll look it up for you, I have it for you.
Yeah, the same thing, like when it's like where it references like the different books, where she's like, oh, I think there's this quote, and it's like, it's from this book. That comes up later on too.
Right. And I mean, and then there's also like, even just below that, the fasten your seatbelts, turbulence, to play the landing gear flaps down, and then it cuts back to the typewriter font with, here we go. I mean, there's a certain level of stage direction here as well, right? Where he's like giving like the sense of using it to kind of push the action and give the reader the sort of jolt that he wants in certain spots.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think of this section as a whole?
It's crazy. It's really, I mean, it's really impressive. I mean, it reads like a fever dream, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it reads like it moves, but at the same time, it never loses its internal logic. I mean, it is always moving at a steady pace, even with some, pages and pages of the, chorus typewriter, however you want to refer to it, taking up literally like 5 pages at a time on occasion, with ruminations and digressions all over the place. But it holds, and it is almost propulsive. Like, I mean, it's actually kind of stunning how fast I thought it moved, given that, like Brian said, it's basically 2-3 total paragraphs. This is like 400 pages.
Yeah,
I mean,
and to be honest, I'm not certain that that's supposed to be more than one paragraph. I hit that and I was like, I wonder if we made a typo here, because, and this is maybe jumping ahead of.
Yeah, I was actually wondering about that when there was that first paragraph break. I'm like, okay, why now? Like, you've been torturing me for 50 pages. Why do you now have a paragraph break?
Yes, and I'm not. I was going to ask, but I don't want to know the answer. Like, I don't want to know that I don't want to know that we made a mistake. So we're just going to assume whatever. But I was thinking of it as one paragraph too, because this is the most beat-like section of the book. And there's the whole thing about Burroughs, which, is not the first like beat writer you'd think of, although he's kind of obviously associated with all those people. But
the best one.
Kind of the best one,
in my opinion. But, yeah.
Totally agree. But like the old wasn't On the Road was written as one long paragraph, one long. Well, not paragraph, but one long piece of paper. One piece of paper. And this has that kind of feel of like that, and that's almost like the invented part aspect of it, of the writer from beyond sort of trying to continually craft this, because that beat mentality is like everything, let it go, just let it flow out, go with it. And this has that propulsive style to it. And so having it be like basically one paragraph, even if it's supposed to be like 3 paragraphs or however it's broken up, that's still like one long, it's like one just fever dream, like you say, or one just like tunnel into this particular setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just found myself just laughing at all sorts of parts during this, though. It's so mad and crazy, and then the karmas show up and they're mad and crazy, and it gets even more mad and crazy. It's just this awesome spiral.
It really is.
The karmas were a pretty fascinating invention. I mean, you call them kind of like the Kardashians, but even more earlier, Chad. But
yeah.
I almost feel like you're almost looking like the House of Sod at the same time too, right? Like,
right.
You're talking about like this immensely wealthy, powerful family that does nothing. What do they do? Like, what is it that they actually are like? Why do they even choose to continue to exist? Like there's
look
really
at Penelope's ass.
There's just nothing happening there, and at the same, and it's almost a component that feels like the most like magic realist, which I think it's referenced towards the end of the section.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's clearly the most grounded in reality. That yes, this this kind of family, it does exist. Maybe not, to the scale of hundreds of family members like this, but yeah, no, there are families that are functionally this multi-generational, weird as hell, don't have to do much of anything other than text or tweet, and yeah.
Yep, I completely agree. And like the misspelling of Iris's name is like such a
hysterical. It's just so good.
It is so perfect. I really like going back through this and like seeing how it like creates their existence. And I think that there's I don't know if you remember this, either of you, but so there's one part in here where Penelope asks Iris like what their family, like where all that wealth came from. And it's like, oh, well, we make a product, but it's insignificant. We don't talk about it. It's a thing that's everywhere, but you don't know, blah, blah. But I feel like in the earlier section, there's an allusion to like his brother or her brother the writer believing that they made something. And I can't remember what that thing was. Do you remember this, or I might be inventing this?
I don't remember that exactly. Okay. I mean, I think they're back in some like supposition or whatever, but I don't really remember anything more grounded than that.
Yeah, I feel like there's like, I'll see if I can find it at some point. But I thought there was like one part like in the part right before this with the young man and the young woman making the film, that there's a reference that she says that when they start talking about Penelope, where she says, "Oh, well, they hit my it's nope." I don't see it, but I thought that maybe she's at some point in there she says something like, "Oh, well, my brother thought that they made like pencils or something like really insignificant, but they get all their wealth from that."
Penelope mentions that like within this section where she like goes like, "What is it? Is it shoe polish? Is it this? Is it that?" Like these sort of like really quotidian things that they like have cornered the market on.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it doesn't go any further than like random, everyday items that seem to be of no real value or worth, but they happen to have the market completely cornered on or whatever.
Right. Very true. And there's the part that I was looking at that it doesn't say anything about what they make, but on 84, like in the section earlier, where she talks about, here I am, another woman in the shadow of a man who incessantly steals the spotlight, referring to the writer, her brother. Here, lost in a sort of museum to my brother, and then my brother built himself. Yes, it's true, with my money, with my blood diamonds, which is a nice foreshadowing to like the end of this sequence where she finds all the diamonds just out there. And the crazy-ass green cow, which is definitely the most magical realist aspect of the book so far.
But I feel
not just a crazy cow; it's a horse raping decapitates and then rapes.
Wrong, it decapitates and then rapes.
In that order, according to the veterinarian.
Exactly. The cow was, and then it ate a few of the local kids as well. It's just.
I love the idea of them going out on these like green cow hunting because there are many of the cows and this is the one that's left behind. But I like that Iris breeds these crazy ass green cows that rape and then decapitate and then rape horses and then eat children, and the family just goes out hunting them as a lark. Like I could just picture them all dressed up in like crazy gear going out and trying to hunt down big giant green cows.
Yeah,
with riding pants on,
yes.
and then after about an hour of it, they're like, you know what? It's a little hot out today. Let's just let it go. Like a few more of the neighbor kids can go. It's cool. We're good.
Yeah, totally fine. Ain't no thing.
Ain't no nice stuff.
There are definitely several spots where I kind of was like, wait, what the hell did I just read? I have to go back to make sure I read that correctly. All right, it is a raping cannibal bovine beast. Okay. Got it.
Not the strangest thing I've read so far. Not the strangest thing.
That's very true. Yeah, I thought this section might be the funniest so far too.
Well, I also feel like I read Kensington Gardens by Farzan like I don't know however many years ago, but not when it first came out in the States. I actually had to order a copy in from Britain, and just his range of knowledge and the way he deploys it in his writing. I mean, the fluidity with which he'll just drop random information about whatever, but like place it in, but he's still funny about it, and he's in such control of it. Like that, this section is what reminded me most of that experience with Kensington Gardens, where like, I mean, Kensington Gardens, he's spending all this time talking about the 60s and actually lots of different things, like, you know, boys' books from the early 20th century and, you know, the law and J.M. Barrie and all that. But here he's just, you know, spurts of information and going on a long digression about Burroughs that, of course, ties everything about this entire section together. It's just really quite an amazing thing, I feel like, to read and kind of like experience as a reader.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I really like the Burroughs section in here quite a bit.
Yeah, it's actually one of the better summations of Burroughs that I've ever really encountered.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we might have lost Brian here. We're just gonna go with this alone for the moment here and see if I can add him back in. But yeah, I love that part because I love Burroughs, and his story is crazy. That whole thing, the killing of Jean Vollmer is nuts, and like, you know, one of those like legendary sort of literary stories that's both horrifying and somehow also a little bit fascinating. And this kind of construction of his life and like how they lived and how they lived in Mexico is fantastic. And I assume like I never didn't check up on like any specific facts within here, but I assume that it's all basically true.
I mean, from what I know, it sounds pretty basically true.
Yeah.
But
absolutely. We were just talking, sorry, Brian, we lost you for a second there, but we were just talking about the Burroughs section.
Okay. Yeah, my phone literally melted outside, said, emergency. It's too hot.
Are you
like
serious?
It had temperature. Yeah, a temperature showed up on it.
That's intense. So you're a Burroughs fan too, aren't you?
Yes, I do. I like him.
Yeah. So did you like the section in here with all his little history in Mexico?
Well, yeah, of course. What's not to like about it? But before I got kicked off, the one thing I thought was really interesting, I know a lot of comparisons are to David Foster Wallace, but some of it reminds me of like Mark Lehner with like the humor with how he spills out all the smarts and pop culture references and whatnot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a few times I looked at it, it's like there's one section and it's towards the end where it references, there's one that I was just like, who are these people? Oh, where it's talking about, so when she takes a picture of the giant green cow as it's running away and it just becomes like an emerald stain. And it says, a dubious portrait to be hung on the wall of a Ripley museum where those other photos, more imprecise than drawings, already hang. Photos of the Yeti, of Nessie, of Mothman, of Sasquatch, of the Chupacabras, of the albino alligators in Manhattan, of Mike Wazowski and James P. Sully Sullivan spotted one night in summer camp, Penelope, blah, 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 blah. I was like, who the hell are those people? Do you know where the last two are from, Wazowski and Sullivan?
I don't know that reference, no.
Tom?
No, but I feel like when you're going to tell me, I'm going to get really annoyed that I didn't realize it. Go ahead.
You are Monsters, Inc.
God! Okay.
Yep.
I never saw it, so I feel justified in being dumb in that. So that's cool.
Your daughter is still young. Tom and I probably both saw this with our kids at some point in time.
Okay. Yeah, I actually took my one of my cousins when she was 5. That was her first movie in the theaters, was seeing Monsters, Inc.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah. I go way back with that movie.
Yeah, all of a sudden when I saw Sully Sullivan, I was like, oh, that's right. Yes, okay. Yeah. But I didn't know. And then there's like the earlier reference where it's like this great one on 180 where it's where they're talking about, and because the first time Penelope saw her naked, she who'd never felt anything resembling a sapphic longing, not even riding the alkaloid crest of the whitest night, she remembered the words of a writer she read once, and whose name now escaped her. Quote, I want to rip her arm off. I want to sleep in her uterus with my foot hanging out, which is from, either of you know?
I do know this. Oh, I remember reading it. It was like, what the hell? My foot hanging out of her uterus? Is that Barry Hannah?
It is. It is Barry Hannah.
Score one.
Okay, I feel Barry. I kind of guessed it might have been Barry Hannah or someone from that ilk. I mean,
who really hates women but loves women? Oh, it's got to be Barry Hannah, right? He crushes their heads with stones and then fucks them. So yeah, it's totally him.
In keeping with the big green cow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is and the bit after that. So this is one of those sections where like that voice in the typewriter, the writer from beyond, whatever you want to call it, is that kind of voice of authority. Because after that quote, it's It begins with, and no, just in case, better to be clear, the quote does not belong to William Faulkner, but it does belong to one of his bastard yet illegitimate progeny, one of the best and most pureblood and purebred of all, one of those writers of the American South flinging sentences like Molotov cocktails concocted with 1/3 gasoline, 1/3 swamp water, and 1/3 all the sweat that Penelope and Lena left on those sheets that afterwards they twisted and rang out without their laughter ever ceasing. And this is a great quote. That's a great paragraph.
Yeah. Do you think he brought in Burroughs in particular because he's kind of grouping him in as a Southern writer? Or I mean, there's that, I forget if it's apocryphal or not, but that quote by Garcia Marquez asked about who's the greatest South American writer, and his response was Faulkner.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think because of Burroughs' time spent in Texas, New Orleans, and Mexico City, do you think that's part of why he brought? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't usually go down the route of like, why did the writer do this or that? But I'm just kind of curious, given how often, American South writers are showing up, and like what his reference points are as he's laying this book out. I don't know.
That's interesting. I thought the Faulkner one was partially because of what you say, the Marquez reference, and like there's a running joke throughout here that the writer never reads Faulkner. Like, he almost reads Faulkner, but doesn't, and there's a bit of that kind of distancing between, if you're a writer from Argentina, obviously Faulkner was a huge influence on you, and sort of putting a bit of space in between that. I was thinking
it's trying to be anti-Faulkner when you think about it, right?
While still being like very Faulkner-like.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways too. The Burroughs thing, I wasn't thinking of it as a South, but just more as like one of the keys to like this is my beat section. This is that part of it, and like this is also the druggiest section in a lot of ways. Like the Penelope and Max's Maxie or Maximiliano, however you want to say his name, like their whole thing is like all their drugs, but there's constant references to her being like always drunk. Like, that's the only way that she could deal with the karmas.
And the whole family, or the whole Karma family, being at different times of the day, either like amped up on amphetamines or on some sort of muscle relaxant, just to like keep them evened out throughout the day. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's got a lot of those beats to it of like, drug, and like and Burroughs fits right in there, both because of like the drug aspect and somewhat of what you're saying of the South American or Southern writer aspect, and then also because of the Jean Vollmer story as like the woman who's sort of sacrificed, and this man continues to live on and becomes great, and she's been murdered. And is dead to time. And in a sense, Penelope sort of parallels that story in that her brother takes all of her good, material and reshapes it into something that makes him very famous. And she's left like in her house completely mad and crazy, possibly from having drank the green cow milk.
I'm going to go with neon milk. That's usually the safe bet when you're trying to diagnose where it all went wrong.
I love that image though of her like drinking from this giant green cow with a destroyed like wedding dress stuffed full of random diamonds. Seems
what I love about that image.
What the hell?
Here's another question, Chad. What was the likelihood that you ever thought in your life you would say that I really love the image of her drinking from a neon green cow in a tattered wedding dress while it was stuffed full of diamonds? I mean, Yep. Pretty well you were ever going to say that.
Yep, that is very true. I never thought that I would say anything like that.
The more we bring up the cow, the more I'm actually kind of wondering about how much of Greek mythology he's also playing with here. Like I'm thinking about Europa riding away on the back of a bull, which was Zeus, and the whole Penelope Ulysses thing, all that. I'm almost thinking that I might go back through this section and try and pick out if there are other myths that he's messing around with exactly in here. But,
that's interesting.
There's Horus, right? There's mentions of Horus as well, and Apollo,
which he immediately references as being analogous to Apollo and Phoebus and all that. So that's interesting.
I've been rereading Ulysses, the James Joyce Ulysses, this summer too, and like that, I assume the green cow just stands for Ireland. Just kidding. Just kidding. But like the Penelope thing does strike at that and makes sense. That's really interesting.
And even the fact that the family name is Karma. I mean, There's clearly a ton that he's throwing around in here, and I think in a lot of ways deliberately just to mess with the reader on some level, to wrong foot, but at the same time, like I'm wondering if there's other stuff to just sort of pull out if you felt like it.
That's a good point. It's really interesting. The part that I was going to mention that we talked about a little bit before we started recording that is the like sort of my blank spot is on like page 195 where it says like diamonds Penelope will use to build that house beside a forest and on the beach, the house where she'll live with her brother and he whose name must not be mentioned. Please, no matter how bad you want to, okay? And I was like, who's the he? I don't remember this. Like this is like one of these things I don't remember where that goes. And it comes up again. I think it maybe came up before that as well, like in Sly, and I think one other time after that it's like sort of alluded to, but I can't quite remember where that goes. So it's kind of a fun part of being old and losing your mind a little bit. I don't remember everything. Again, I can be surprised all over again.
I'm just glad I made it home with like my wallet last night. It's one of those kind of nights. Oh crap! How'd I get home? Do I have my wallet? Oh yeah, and who is he whose name must not be mentioned? Please, no matter how. Are you kidding me? I'm just trying to live right now. I can't remember that.
Tom, do you have any speculation on that?
I mean, I didn't read ahead. I stopped at the end of this section. The first thing that comes to my mind, and just because, this is something I sell all the time, is that it almost sounds like a Voldemort reference on something.
I know it does. Yeah.
And I don't doubt that there's something else connected to it, but I kind of feel like he's using that construction to specifically reference Harry Potter, actually.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I think that's definitely being referenced. I also think that her, when she has sex with Max Milano, whatever his name is, before he dies, as she kills him, like she might be impregnated by him, and this could be the he,
her child or whatever. Yeah,
right. Which would be kind of interesting too. So,
which also ties right back into mythology with Horus. The son of Isis and Osiris. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, God, it's a very layered book.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying. I'm going to go back to reading like Clive Cussler or something. Because in Clive Cussler, if you get a diamond, it's just like, it's money, It's in the bottom of the ocean, and Dirk Pitt knows how to like scuba dive and shoot guns, and he'll get the diamond. It's pretty easy to follow.
It was Clive Cussler that wrote like Sahara or whatever that Matthew McConaughey movie was based on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he got sued for like $100 million because of that movie.
Really?
Oh,
did you know that? Yeah.
From audience goers wanting their money back?
No, apparently, from what I understand, apparently he misrepresented how many copies the book had sold, and no one at the production company like took the time to actually check to see if it like was as huge of a bestseller and had as much of a built-in market. And so when it tanked, they're like, "Well, why did it tank?" And they look and be like, "No one knows who Clive Cussler is."
And now everyone knows who Clive
Cussler is.
Jesus.
But yeah, like there's just, as you reread parts, you're like, man, that ties in with the first part. It ties in with this part. I mean, like you could just take this whole section based off of Wuthering Heights if you wanted, and how it parallels with Wuthering Heights, or Mm-hmm. I did it through the Kate Bush lens, the entire thing, because that's where my mind was. But
that works for me too.
There's so many references that, like kind of concentric circles upon circles upon circles that overlap all over the place.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think one of the things that I really appreciate about what he's doing in here as well, though, is his understanding of technology and how it works and how people interact with it is just phenomenal. Like, I mean, the way he represents social media, just like, in the previous section talking about like how it's now about getting devices smaller and smaller, so that they're doing things in this documentary that would have taken years of cinema school, and now it's just like a couple Google clicks and their recorder already knows how to do it, sort of thing. But like he just understands it as almost more like taking the viewpoint of the technology as a platform and a way of thinking and a way of interacting than really concerning himself with like what the actual platform is, and that to me is really, I don't know, that just as a reader, that's something that irritates the hell out of me when when writers are completely like wrapped up in like, this is a text, this is an Instagram, this is a this. Like, no one thinks that way. They think of it in terms of like interaction, and he's clearly nailed that part down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's neat too because there's also that plea at the beginning to like unplug if you can, to go with your body's electricity. And so there's, I don't know, and like the brothers transformed into particles, and so there's that aspect of it that matches up again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Going back to that first line, it really is a Homeric epic of sorts, or like that, a callback to that with the "Sing, O goddess, the wrath of Penelope." Is a ruinous wrath that caused her family countless sorrows, but that was, it seems, of great inspiration to her brother, who's now more particular than ever. A brother transformed into particles, courtesy of the God particle, and now all of them stardust, blown in the wind, floating here and there and everywhere, high above in the big sky, looking down on this little earth. Like, that has that whole... Both the opening, I forget what that's called, like that opening epitaph of like, oh, sing, goddess, call to the gods, and then followed by the god being like her brother as like this transcendent figure.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of lays it all out. It's like the next page, history is nothing but an agreed upon hallucination. So, I mean, you're definitely getting hallucinations and histories in this, right? The whole thing. And even like another little sprinkling, the next page, like just kind of toying with you, where it's talking about fasten your seatbelts, turn off all electronic devices. So there it is again, that kind of like unplug for a second, and then we get a whole history of these people that can't unplug from anything.
Maybe we should use that as the rallying cry to, overcome Amazon Chicago for best-selling translated book.
Amazon doesn't have a store in Chicago yet, do they?
Oh,
no.
yes, they do.
They do?
Yep. It's about 6 blocks from Under Bridge, I think.
Wow. Those stores don't have anything. Like they're...
I'm not... Yeah, I don't care. Like, I don't...
It's something that this book often rebels against in many ways, is like that idea of like algorithmic purchasing. But that's for a different time. On that same page, though, on 101, there's also a reference to the Olympic heights of an ancient continent. So you have the Olympia reference there, too. Mm-hmm. It is throughout. Absolutely right.
I think Tom nailed it. Yeah, I think
he's
so,
all
too.
Over it.
Crushed it.
Boom. Boosh. This is a great book to talk about while you're playing beer pong. Score! Drink.
Yeah, can we get that on the agenda for June 25th?
Yeah, we should. Yeah. Drinking game related to the invented part would be fantastic.
Only when reading David Foster Wallace can you be a bro and try to talk about postmodern literature. Like, if you think about it, bro, that section about the brother that's really good at punting is epic. I mean, it's like averaging that's like net 75 yards. You know how far that is, bro?
Pass the Malort. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. Nice from the heart, Jesus. Oh, my stomach churns just thinking about that. Oh, no. So horrible. So much the worst thing ever. So anyways, I guess we should probably wrap up with any last thoughts you guys have, and then if you have what your favorite quote was from this particular section, if you have one.
I'm literally sweating alcohol into my shirt right now, so I'm just going to go straight to I'm going to go straight to my favorite quote. Just to bring it back full circle with the new, is it New Adult?
Yeah.
Right? We said
New Adult
novels.
Yeah,
page 134, where Iris is talking about the worst thing that ever happened to her in her whole life, and Penelope's thinking like she got raped by a cow or something like that, but it was really her grandma told her haircut didn't look nice when she was 19. And then this is Penelope's thought. Penelope decides not to tell Iris that she thinks childhood and its tragedies would be hard-pressed to reach the age of 19. That wouldn't be a childhood so much as the noun suddenly turning into the adjective form of fatigue, childish, glass, and to keep listening, hearing as little as possible. There's your New Adult.
That would be the essence of New Adult. Yes.
That's perfect. How about you, Tom? Do you have a favorite?
It's the worst thing
I mean,
ever.
I got a bunch, and I wasn't totally ready to like grab one, but I do like this thing about the Karma's pronunciation of modern. So they let her express herself because Penelope doesn't speak. Rather, since they understand little to nothing what she says, she expresses as if hers were some kind of modern discipline. And the Karmas always say modern, drawing out the O into an ah and inserting the silent yet always exceedingly expressive contamination of an H with a mix of humor and derision, as if modern in itself were already a modern word. Just that sort of like play on, just social cues and all that is hysterical. Yeah, it just that stuff's all through this section. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
I think we should post that part on the blog because I really want to ask Will how he translated that because I was really interested with how he knew to get the right sound on it.
Yeah, very true. You write something up
because I normally don't think about translation, but that one really made me think of like how the hell do you translate that from Spanish and get the same feel across? Because he nailed it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You should write a little thing, ask him, or write it and we'll post it on there for sure. So, like, if anyone's listening and wants to write anything for it, that's totally fine. My one from here is on 163, which is where it's talking about the brother and Ian Forster, and there's this little section where it says, "This is exactly what it is to be a writer, Penelope," her brother said. And then he told her one of his favorite anecdotes, also about Forster, that was a perfect match for his favorite photo of Forster, in which, when a friend accused him of, quote, not facing facts, the writer responded, "Don't tell me to face facts. Facts are like the walls of a room. To face one, you have your back to the other three." Yes, deciding what part of reality to face was also one of the many more or less secret ways of being a writer. To choose is to invent.
Ah, very nice.
It's like a somewhat more serious one, but I like that one a lot in here too. So anyway, so if you're listening to this, you can always find on the 3% website. There's a bunch of posts for this book, both of the previous podcast, but also like different write-ups of different sections, parts of an interview with Faison that's going to be serialized over like a 5-part section, which is all very, very interesting, and other things like that. You can also join the GoodReads group, which is just under 2-month review at GoodReads. If you go to any one of those posts, you'll find a link to it, and post any comments you have or questions, and we can use them on the podcast. If you're in Chicago, Tom, where can they find you?
So I'm at Volumes Books up in Wicker Park, 1474 North Milwaukee, and volumesbooks.com is the store site, and you can find us from there. And we're also absurdly active on social media with the handle Volumes Books pretty much across all platforms. But yeah, we tons of books, tons of coffee, beer, wine, all of it. So it's a pretty great space.
It's a great store. You guys haven't been open super long either, have you?
Just over a year now. A year and like 2 months, I think, something like that. So
the first time I was there was for the BEA last summer, and I love it because you guys have I love when you can just walk around with a beer and look at books.
Yep, that's what we love too. So
you can do that at Barnes and Nobles. They just don't like it. And if they say anything, I'm like, look, I'm an alpha dog buyer. You don't even know.
You want to wander around with a beer and look at books and not get like this stink eye from half the employees. You should head on over to Volumes. If the stink eye doesn't bother you, hit your local Barnes and Noble, and while you can.
I'm just here to read some Clive Cussler and drink a beer. I'll be done in a second.
Oh man, and Brian, it's always you're on Twitter at @BrianWood_, which is also linked to all of these.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to tweet maybe sometime this week. I don't know what to do with it, but sure.
I don't know that it even matters, but like at least people want to find out more about whatever you have to say. They can follow you there.
Absolutely.
So thanks again. And next week, we will be back with the last part of this section, the third part, which goes from page 208 to 229. So it's a really short one in contrast to this one. And that will be fun. So we'll talk to you then.
Just you wait.